come to mind, feel free to let us know those too. Okay. So why am I not? Okay, here we go. Treasurer. So the treasurer, your basic function is you're the custodian of the funds of your PTA. You must keep everything transparent and everything accountable. You need your checks and balances. You're not there to manage the money solely. You're there to report out. Your president checks and signs off and approves. You always have a third non-signer looking at bank statements. So you're the custodian, but you're also working as a team. The budget dictates how you spend the money. If the line item isn't in your budget, go back to your general membership and get that approval. Budgets don't match. You don't want that to exactly match. A budget's a guide. If you have something that's a significant change within your budget, that's when you're going to amend your budget. Your EC, you work with your EC as a team, and those are your elected officers, your principal, and your parliamentarian. And you as officers, as the executive committee, carry out the work outlined in that budget. Full transparency is a key to a functioning EC and a functioning PTA. Treasurer presents treasurer reports at each meeting. These meetings may look a little bit different. Your treasurer's reports may change depending if you're talking to your EC or your general membership, but you should be doing a financial summary, a treasurer's report at each meeting. I always like to put in place this little self-check. If you can stand in front of your parents and tell them what you're doing and feel proud about what you're doing, then you're doing a good job. You should never do anything that you can't defend. Here's a little, I like to point this out. We answer to our members. They're the ones that elected us in most cases. It is their money, and we answer to them. Your local unit leaders answer to them. Your council are there to help your local unit leaders. Your district are also there to help your council and local unit leaders. Your state leadership is here and your national leadership. But you can see that this kind of veers down. We become less involved. We're really about our members. Okay, so you move into that transition. You transition into that treasurer role. A few things you want to check right up front. Verify your incorporation is current. These are filed in the spring on April 15th or before April 15th. So hopefully it is current, but just double check that. Make sure your 990 has been filed or is in process. Verify your insurance. You have an insurance policy and it's current, and note what that renewal date is. Verify your audit. Make sure that that's in process. That will be due to the state on September 30th. Ensure your council dues were paid and you're up to date. Ensure your memberships are paid. And here's the breakdown. You do this through MemberHub. It's $375, but just so you have the breakdown, $1.50 goes to state and $2.25 goes to national. Council memberships, look within MemberHub and they'll let you know if anything's missing. Okay. Know your financial timeframes. And this does get a little bit tricky. Your officer year is your last day of school. That's when you got the meeting minutes from your election and you went down, changed your bank account and all those things. You took over after the last day of school. Your fiscal year is outlined in your bylaws. This is that 12-month period and it's your financial period. Now, unfortunately, your budget year doesn't always coincide with your fiscal year. So we get a little bit creative. Once you go past your fiscal year, your budget year is still in place. So you're still using that as a guide until you get next year budget approved. So try to keep that budget meeting about the same time every year. Okay, so meeting responsibilities. Again, at your executive committee meetings, you're going to present that treasurer's report. It may be a little bit different. It may be more informal. You may be talking about some issues like bounce checks. And for that reason, these minutes are private. We don't share these out. These just stay within the executive committee. Your board meetings. Your board meeting, you should have a comprehensive treasurer's report. Remember that your board is your legally responsible body of the association. So make sure they know what's going on with the money and they're informed and making good decisions because legally they're responsible. Your general membership meetings, you must have at least 3 a year, and that's in your bylaws. So you're going to set up at least 3. You can have more. At the first meeting, it's pretty critical. You're going to do your treasurer's report, let them know where the funds are, where you stand. You're going to discuss, and once you're done, this is filed. This doesn't need a vote. Then you're going to go ahead and present that budget review, have a discussion, and then this is a vote. This is something you'll have to make a motion to approve, a second, and go ahead and get that voted on. Then you're going to present your audit. Now, you do not need to give them the actual audit report. You have to give a summary, give them the highlights. If there are any findings, go over those. So this is just a summary. You have a discussion, and then you file it. This is not a vote. This is somebody else's work. It can't be changed. It is what it is, so you just file it. But you do need your minutes to show that you presented it. Okay, your second and third meetings, again, you're doing your treasurer's reports, and if you need to amend the budget, this is where you're going to do that. Okay, everything you present at a meeting, you should give a copy to your treasurer to file with the meeting minutes. So when you say the budget was approved, you have an exact copy of which budget you discussed and which budget was approved. Okay, your bank account. We all know on the last day of school, we take those meeting minutes down. We go ahead and put our signers on. It has to be the president and the treasurer. We do recommend your secretary as your backup signer, but it doesn't have to be your secretary. If you have a conflict or the person's not very accessible, not at school much, you can select somebody else on your EC. And I just gave an example here. We had this happen where the two sisters were the secretary and the president. So we don't want people by marriage or by blood being signers on the bank account. All right, debit cards, bank cards, and credit cards are not allowed at this time. I'm going to put a little caveat there. We are working on ways to modernize Georgia PTA. We're hoping that we can allow more of an electronic use moving forward. So give us a little bit of time. We're working on it, I promise. Right now, we do allow Square and PayPal, and this is where money's held in an account and then is transferred out. We are working on, we know people want to use Venmo and some of the other, what are some of the other ones? Cash App, things like that. So we're working on a way that we can show transparency, we can show accountability, we can reconcile those accounts and make sure we're, like with a check request, getting the proper signature. So give us a little bit of time. We are working on that as well. Bank-to-bank transfers are not allowed at this time. Again, that's another one that we're working on. So if you want to go on the bank and pay bills from there, that's possibly something that we can work through as well. So give us a little bit of time. Cash box, this does have a procedure. We call it petty cash. It's not really petty cash, but I know that's what we all call it. Just make sure you're following those steps. You're not writing out a check made to cash. You're writing it out to a person and you're following those steps. Voided checks, it happens. Void it out, do a check request form, staple it, and just write an explanation. You have to have a piece of paper that explains every check. You just can't have a missed check. Bounce checks, we really leave this to the EC to decide how to handle these. You will need to do paperwork for it, but it really falls, if there are fees, if you're going to write off the amount, to your EC how you manage that. And again, you discuss that in an EC meeting and you keep that confidential. Never sign a blank check. We all know that. Okay. Let me get that out of the way. Okay. Bank statements and reconciliations. Everyone on your EC should be reviewing your bank statements. We can give online banking is allowed. The treasurer and the president will have full access, which you can give you only access to your other EC members and say, hey, go take a look at what we're doing. It allows you to look at data in real time. And this is a really great tool that we should be using, I think, a little bit more. Remember, on these bank statements, 3 signatures are required. So your treasurer does a complete reconciliation and then signs. Every money, every transaction in, every transaction out, every transaction on your bank statement should have a piece of paper that goes with it. whether it's an electronic transfer, whether it's a square, whether it's a check, whether it's a deposit. It should have something that goes along with it. Your president then goes back and reviews that reconciliation and then signs off. Your non-signer is looking for red flags. We don't expect them to reconcile the account, but we do expect them to review it and look for those red flags and then go ahead and sign off. The treasurer provides proof of all reconciliations in a ledger or with a reconciliation report. Okay. Theft and fraud. And I will tell you, the places we catch theft and fraud is on those monthly bank statements. There are 4 things that I've been to many trainings about this. 4 things: incentive, opportunity, rationalization, and capability. There's only one thing you can do anything about, and that's opportunity. If there's no opportunity, there's no theft. So stay on top of your records, review them in real time on that bank account or with your monthly bank statement, stay on top of it. If you think that there's possible theft going on, go ahead and reach out to your council leaderships to take yourself out of that equation and let somebody that doesn't have a personal interest take a look at things. Okay, insurance. Be familiar with your insurance coverage. There are some caveats. I've been to a couple of insurance trainings. They don't cover motorized vehicles. So make sure that hayride or the little train or those type of things is covered by the vendor's insurance and not ours. It covers volunteers only. If you pay them, which includes gift cards, they will not be covered by PTA insurance. We can use gift cards, and we'll get into that a little bit, but we can't pay them for the work that they're doing. You can't give a gift card for doing a great job on the spring carnival because you just paid them and now they're not a volunteer. Something that we recommend is social media insurance. We're seeing a rise in these claims, and they can be as minuscule as a parent putting in a comment on a Facebook picture, "Remove my child's picture, please." That can result in a lawsuit, and it's a legitimate claim to make for your insurance, and 9 times out of 10 they pay it. So things to keep in mind: you have to be doing these things if you're going to make a claim on your insurance. Bank statements need to be signed monthly. Checks need to have 2 signers. Your audit needs to be completed by the guidelines, and your budget needs to be approved by the GM. If you have theft and the insurance company comes in or reviews your documents and you're not doing any of these consistently, I'm not talking about a one-off, they won't pay your claim. Okay. Gift cards, bingo, and raffles. So the IRS really talks about the de minimis in value and frequency. Where we see people get into trouble is their high amount gift cards, their Amex gift cards, their $100 to Macy's for doing a great job on Carnival. Those are perceived as payments. Those are minor in value. You know, we kind of the cutoff that we've seen in trends is $25. The frequency is one-time use. If somebody's birthday, if somebody's had a death in the family, these are the type of things, you know, we see those given to teachers, or we see those given to volunteers. If you have a teacher appreciation, if you have a volunteer appreciation, that's a one-time event, and that's where we see those gift cards, and that's acceptable. This is a great tool for us, and we don't want to lose it by abusing it. And this has happened in other states where they do not allow gift cards. Bingo and raffle, the only thing I want to say here is know what those requirements are and make sure you give yourself enough time. Okay, know your bylaws. There are 3 things that you should know right off the top of your head: what your fiscal year is, what your minimum dues are, and what your quorum is. And also know that your minimum dues within your bylaws is what you have to offer to your members. If you have an $8 due in your bylaws, then you have to offer that. And that's usually the price point you do your teachers and your staff and your cafeteria people and maybe your bus drivers, you offer that out. But if a parent comes and says, "I want to join for $8, that is a package that you have to offer. You can make them bigger and add all kinds of fun stuff to those packages, but your minimum due has to be what you offer. Okay, the budget. So just as a general rule, you can kind of look at 3 years averages for your starting point to draft up your initial budget. This year, of course, we have to take an account to our special circumstances with COVID-19. So look at the budget, try to, think about what makes sense, talk with your EC. Your principal's going to have a lot of great input into this as far as what their needs are. Include startup funds for the new school year. So this is essentially carryover. Make sure if you have summer expenses, like maybe you do a backpack program or you do some training over the summer, that you account for that. The budget's approved by the EC. So you kind of talk through it with your EC. You come up with what you think, this is good, is what we're going to present to the board of directors. You go to the board of the directors, they approve it, and then you take it to your general membership. So make sure you have those 2 meetings before you take it to your general membership. The budget should know what you expect for income and expenses, and you should have a budget line for each of these. You might need to amend your budget. It's very common, and this can be done at any general membership meeting. Monthly treasurer's reports will help guide what needs to be amended. So if you didn't think you needed mulch and you do need mulch, you can amend it to factor that in. If your fall festival made a lot more or a lot less than you thought, it might be significant enough for you to say, hey, I think we might need to do an amendment on this. Do not spend money that's not allocated in your budget. If it's something you need and you want to put it in there, just take it to the general membership and say, hey, put it through your EC, your board, and your general membership and say, hey, I think this is something we need to do. Usually if you can explain it to your people will approve it. Okay, carryover funds. So the IRS, the National PTA and State PTA, there's no ruling on what exactly that has to be because it's going to be something different for every PTA. Your carryover for the budget should be based on what you need to get to your next point of income. So your summer expenses, your startup expenses, until you get to the fall when we start doing membership and fundraisers. The rule of thumb is you want to spend the money that those parents gave you in the year that they gave it to you. You might have a 5th grader at elementary school. They're not going to give you a lot of money if you're going to hold on to it. They want it to be spent when their child's there. So keep that in mind and keep your carryover to where it's just going to cover your expenses. You might need a little bit of a buffer, but again, that rule is to spend it on the parents that gave it to you, on their children. And again, depending on what your costs are, you have to determine what that's going to look like. All right, so some budget myths, that there's a required carryover. There is not. Each PTA decides this for themselves. That you need a balanced budget. You do not need a balanced budget, especially if you had too much or too little last year. I know a lot of PTAs that had all their events canceled in the spring. They're not going to have a balanced budget. This kind of leads into just because it was budgeted, do you need to spend it? No, you don't. If you had money allocated for a big event and the event gets canceled, then you don't have to spend that money. You don't have to reallocate it. You might want to do something later. Again, that communication with your parents at those general membership meetings is going to be really critical. They just want to know what you're doing. And please don't amend your budget to match the exact numbers. That's not the purpose of a budget. A budget is there as a guide. It's there to tell you this is how your members want the money spent. We don't need to amend it to be exact. If there's a significant or a new item, that's when you're going to do that amendment. All right, so here's the sample treasurer's report, and I really love this because it has a year-to-date and it has a budget, and that's what your members want to see. How much have we spent and how much do we have in our budget? This is presented at each meeting. You can pull reports from a profit and loss, a budget versus actual, an Excel spreadsheet, however you want to manage this, that you think your people will best understand. Have your starting balance and your ending balance, and then have each expense for the income. You can do this monthly or you can do it from the last meeting you presented, but it's nice to kind of see that cumulative as you go in that year to date. Okay, so here are some forms that Susan put together for us, and I like annotated forms because you can kind of see what it's supposed to look like. Make sure there are no signatures missing. We see this a lot. Make sure that you have your budget item listed. Here's kind of the sequence. If there's no receipt, don't sign the check. Photocopied receipts are not accepted. Now, we had this great question this morning. With COVID, how do we handle that? So the kind of workaround with this is you can accept a PDF of a receipt until you can get that actual receipt. We know that there might be a timeline with what we have going on right now. You still need the original receipt, but don't hold your check up. If they want to send you a scanned copy, you say, hey, stick it in the mail to me or put it in my mailbox, or I'm going to see you in a couple of weeks, I'll grab it then. We're not saying they don't have to provide it, but we are saying we need to be realistic on timelines and what we're facing right now with restrictions. If they're missing signatures, don't sign it. If you see pencil and scratch out and white out and things like that, have them do a new form. It just looks fishy. We don't want those type of forms to go off to audit. Okay, funds verification form. So this is cash and check. You got some cash in, you got some checks in, how you total it up, how you sign off on it. And then on the back, you're going to list out your checks, who they are, what their numbers, what their amounts, and then you carry this back over to this page here. How many checks for, etc. Okay. You have to do a funds verification form for electronic payments as well. And here, Susan did us an example for WePay. So when you transfer that money over, this is what that looks like. It doesn't matter whether it's cash, checks, WePay, Square, anything. If there's a payment, there's a funds verification form to go along with it. Okay, here's a Square example or PayPal. Okay, so some typical problems. The signers are related. Make sure you kind of look for that. Some of our boards do have married sisters, these type of things. Just make sure that they're not related. No missing signatures. Make sure the dates are complete. The membership section's filled out. Cash, check, electronic. Make sure it's combined and it's totaled out. Missing fees. Make sure that the fees are noted on that form. Make sure the deposit sheet is attached if it's cash or check. And if it's electronic, make sure that documentation, that reconciliation sheet or that deposit documentation is stapled to the funds verification form. Okay, so here are some myths for our forms. Only executive committee members can fill out and sign forms. No, anybody who spends money that needs to be reimbursed can fill this out, a check request form. Anyone on the PTA can count money. Okay, first of all, if you're handling money, you need to be a PTA member or you're not covered by insurance. Two, it should be the people responsible for the money. So your committee chair, somebody on your EC. Again, this is just kind of a common sense. We don't want to allocate out and have a lot of people handling money. We want to have a little bit of control over that. A check request isn't required for like electronic transactions. False. Anytime you have money moving, anytime you have a deposit or you have a payment, then there should be the appropriate paperwork with it. Okay, deposit timelines and storing money. Of course, we want to say get that money in the bank quick, within 24 hours, quick. We know that that's not always possible. We recommend having a safe in your PTA room or use your school safe. Don't take it home. If it goes home, it's not covered by insurance if anything should happen. So don't take money home. If you can't get it in within, that day, the next day, you have to lock it up. Okay, if you do keep a safe, have a system where the money comes in and out and control those keys. Make sure only your bank signers have those keys. Another really great practice is have a drop box. Anybody that's been in PTA, you come in, there's money on the desk, you don't know what it's for. Make sure you have envelopes in a drop box and that's reconciled by two people pretty frequently. All right, so the word ledger, I remember the first time I saw this, it kind of overwhelmed me a little bit, but your ledger is just your tracking system. You're recording your income, your expenses, your budget, your running bank balance. keep this updated. You can use an Excel spreadsheet. You can use QuickBooks, Membership Toolkit, Bookkeeper, Nonprofit Treasurer, Money Minder. There are a lot of ways you can keep this going. Keep it up to date monthly. So if anybody asks to see where you are with the ledger, you can provide it at any time. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Susan.
I just requested remote control.
And you got it.
Awesome. So let me make sure. Yep, I've got it. Good. Okay, so hey everybody, thanks for asking questions in the chat. There were a couple that we haven't addressed yet, so we'll get back to those in just a few minutes. I'm going to talk you through the audit prep process for those of you who have not yet completed your audit for the year. We're also going to talk very briefly about 990s toward the end, and then we'll circle back, and I'm hoping to be done with this in about 10-12 minutes so that we have plenty of time for questions at the end. So the audit is, it's done every single year, and it's also done anytime the treasurer resigns or is replaced for any reason. Or for cause. And what that means is if there's a suspected fraud or theft situation, an audit would be conducted immediately. One of the questions we got this morning was, does an audit have to be done at the end of the year if the treasurer is staying on for a second year? And the answer to that question is yes, the audit has to be done every single year. So typically, sometime in the spring, the executive committee will choose an auditor and make that recommendation to the board of directors. The board of directors will then vote on the auditor and approve that person to do the audit. And then that information is provided to the general membership. The auditor should be an independent party. You don't want somebody who's actively involved in your PTA doing your audit. That is not an objective audit. This protects you as officers, so it's really important that the person who's doing the audit is somebody completely removed from the day-to-day activities of your PTA. Once your final bank statement has been reviewed, reconciled, and signed, the documents can be taken to the auditor. You can do this, well, fiscal year ends are either May 31st, June 30th, or July 31st for the vast majority of Georgia PTA units. And most of us are either May or June. So when you get your bank statement, usually the 4th or 5th day of the month, review it, reconcile it, get it signed, and then make sure you have everything packaged. And we're going to talk about what that looks like in just a moment. And then deliver it to the auditor. The outgoing treasurer is the person who delivers the audit to the auditor. Once the audit is completed, typically the new treasurer will pick it up. However, that's not always the case. So if you are still in a transition process, it could potentially be the existing, the old treasurer or the president, either one, who picks up the audit. At a minimum, the new treasurer should review the audit report in its entirety. The old treasurer is typically going to want to know as well. And you want to make sure that it's complete, it's accurate, and all of that. So make sure that there aren't any blanks on the form before you send it off to council, district, and state. Then at your first general meeting, like Amanda said earlier, you'll present a summary of the findings of the audit. You don't have to go into a ton of detail. You don't have to read the narrative that the auditor writes. You just have to say the findings included A, B, and C, and that's about it. Then a copy of the whole audit, including the findings, is sent to state, to your district leader, and to your council leader. So it'll go to audit990@georgiapta.org, and then also your district director and council president. One thing I do want to point out here, an audit is not meant to be a gotcha or a punitive sort of thing. It's meant to be educational, and pretty much every audit should have some findings. We are human, we are going to make mistakes, and I've had, in the 8 years that I've been doing audits on a regular basis, I think the fewest notations I've had in any audit was last year, and I had an audit that had one sticky note in the whole thing. So even that one, she did an amazing job in it, and there was still one signature missing. It's okay. It's not that big of a deal to have findings. It's actually a good thing because it serves as an educational transition to the new treasurer. Okay, so as far as locating an auditor, you can use an auditor that you have used before. You can seek recommendations from other local units in your area. You can get a recommendation from a parent. Maybe there's someone who's an accountant in the area that you want to use. Or you can ask your council leadership for recommendations. They almost always have a list of people that they would recommend. The auditor's job is to review all of the documents that you present, to identify any procedural problems that need to be addressed moving forward, to verify that the income and the expenses match what you have in your treasurer's reports and your check register or ledger. And then also write up a brief narrative that lets you know what needs to be changed. And again, the idea here is to just provide educational information to help the new treasurer coming in to do things properly. The audit form, the current version of the audit form is what you're seeing on your screen right now. You're going to want to print a copy of this audit form for your auditor. You are going to fill in the top part where it has the date and, hang on, the screen changed. Let me go back to it. There we go. So you're going to fill in the top where you see the date, the PTA unit ID, and all of that. And then also the PTA side of the checklist that's in the middle. And then below that, you're going to leave it blank. You can go ahead and sign the treasurer part at the bottom. You don't have to before you turn it into the auditor, but a lot of people do, especially if the new treasurer is going to be picking it up. Make sure you fill in the year here. This past year, that for the audits that are being done right now, is 1920. And then you'll use the checklist here in the middle to gather all of your documents. So that's what we're getting ready to go through. So the middle checklist is really helpful. And as an auditor, when I get a binder or a box of records and folders and they're in this order, it actually makes doing the audit a whole lot faster and easier. I can tell pretty much immediately when there are things missing if the unit has put things in this order. So begin by making sure that you have a check register. It can be the old-fashioned little checkbook thing that you hand write in. You can use check stubs if you have that. You can have a list in Excel, or if you're a QuickBooks user, you can just print the check register from there. Then you want to make sure that you have all of your bank statements, and there are 13 required. So the first bank statement will be the last one from the prior year audit. So just make a copy of the final bank statement from the prior year, and that's the first bank statement for the current year. So if your fiscal year ends in May, on May 31st, for your audit, you would have May of 2019 bank statement all the way through May of 2020. So that's 13 bank statements total. The bank statements need to be signed by 3 people. And Amanda already talked about this, but it needs to be the president, the treasurer, and then a third person who is not related to any signer on the bank account and is also not a signer. Next would be your funds verification forms and your deposit slips. When you go to the bank to make a deposit, the bank should give you a deposit ticket. Staple that to your funds verification form. That's proof that what you put in the bank is what's on the front of that funds verification form. And then that gets matched up to what's on the bank statement. When you have an electronic deposit, you are going to need to attach either the settlement statement from WePay, the deposit report from Square, or the activity detail from PayPal. And if you are currently using Stripe in MemberHub, you will download the transactions from the orders screen in the store and then reconcile that and print just that list of transactions to show as your verification for your Stripe deposit. For check requests, the receipts or invoices must be attached to the check request form. It's going to happen. You are going to have a lost receipt here or there. If you end up with a lost receipt, have the person write up an explanation of what happened and just make sure that that gets attached to the check request as documentation. A copy of a bank statement or a credit card statement is not a receipt. So even if that person attaches that as documentation, they still need to write up some sort of explanation of the original receipt having been lost. If you have to void a check, you have to attach the voided check with void written across it to a check request form. There should never be a skip in your check requests. They should always be in order, and there should never be one that's missed. And if you void the check, just make sure you staple it so that it's absolutely clear it can never be used. The treasurer's reports, and Amanda already talked about this, but they should at minimum include your starting balance for the reporting period, the income and expenses for that period, your budget for that period and where you stand against it, and then the ending balance for that same reporting period. When you include your budget, you'll need to include at least one budget. The first one would be the adopted budget at the beginning of the year, and make sure it's clearly labeled that it's the adopted budget at the beginning of the year. And then any amendments that you make should also be included. So start with your adopted, and then immediately after add any amended budgets that you have. And just make sure that they're labeled very clearly so that the auditor can look at the budget and pull out the minutes from the corresponding meeting and verify that that actually did take place. And like it's noted here on the slide, the minutes absolutely must reflect the adoption, that it was presented, discussed, and voted on. Minutes are essential for the treasurer's records, and that seems kind of strange because the treasurer is not the secretary, but in the PTA world and in any membership organization, if it's not reflected in the minutes, it didn't happen. So make sure that you provide the minutes for all of the meetings, executive committee meetings, board of directors meetings, and general membership meetings. It's really helpful if you package your minutes by type and then by date. So typically the way I do it is I start with my executive committee meeting minutes, and I have them chronological from the first meeting of the year to the last meeting of the year. Then I do the same for board of directors and clip them together. And then I do the same for the general membership meetings in the bottom. Make sure that you have a copy of your bylaws. If you don't have a current copy of your bylaws, reach out to your council president and he or she can help you with that. The general ledger we've talked about just a little bit. Basically the general ledger is a combination of your check request, your funds verification forms, and your bank statements. That's what's reflected on the general ledger. If you're keeping a check register, that is equivalent to a general ledger. If you're using QuickBooks or a similar program, you can run a GL report from within QuickBooks. Membership Toolkit also has one. Your annual financial report is a profit and loss statement. That shows how much income came in and how much money was spent. Generally, you're going to want to reflect this by budget line. So you can use your budget report for this purpose. That's perfectly acceptable. Just make sure that it shows your starting balance, your net income for the year, and your ending balance, and each of the line items for what came in and what went out. The canceled checks. This is kind of a challenge these days because a lot of banks are not offering canceled checks on statements anymore. Most online access will allow you to take a screenshot of canceled checks, which you can then drop into a Word document and print for your auditor. And I will admit that that was a mistake that I made this year. I have a Word document on this computer and I forgot to print it before I took my books to audit. So the auditor was unable to verify that I had 2 signatures on every single check for my local unit this past year. So just make sure that you have a way for the auditor to verify those 2 signatures. Make sure that you have a copy of the insurance receipt. You are not required to print the entire policy, but you should provide the entire policy, the PDF of that, to all of your EC members. But just make sure that you do have a receipt showing that you purchased your insurance. These items are duplicates of items that are in column 1, so we'll skip over those. And then you also want to make sure that you have a copy of last year's audit and 990. And the reason that both are required is that this is the starting point for all of the information for the current year audit. It's how the balance sheet is developed on page 2 of the audit form at the very top. For the 990, if the EZ or the full 990, it was submitted in the prior year, the entire return needs to be in the current year treasurer records. So it could be, it's usually about 18 pages or 19 pages for the EZ, and it's usually somewhere around 20 to 25 pages for the long form. If you did a postcard, which means that your income was under 50,000 for the year, your gross income was under 50,000, only the confirmation is required, and it's a single sheet. Again, just recap here, if you had under 50,000 in gross revenue, you're going to file a 990N postcard, which is an online login. It was brought to my attention this morning that some of the folks who are logging in to do postcard returns right now are having to reset their accounts. So just be on the lookout for that. If you have between 50,000 and just under 200,000 in gross income, you're going to file the 990EZ. It is a lengthy and complicated form, so we recommend that you get assistance from at least a tax preparer or a nonprofit bookkeeper for that. If you are over 200,000 in gross income, and we do have some local units who meet that requirement, you will need to do the 990 long form. And we strongly recommend that you get a tax preparer or a CPA involved for that process, because there are lots of tricky questions on that. And if you answer a question incorrectly and it gets kicked back to you, there's a $20 per day penalty that you could be forced to pay, and it adds up very quickly. All right, so the audit process in a nutshell is that the auditor is going to look at every single page that you give him or her. If your auditor isn't doing that, it's not a complete audit. You want your auditor literally to touch every single page in your binder or in your folders, however you choose to manage your books. The auditor will make sure that all of your numbers match, so that your what's showing on your check requests and funds verification matches the attached receipts, whether it's a deposit ticket or an invoice from a vendor, and that also matches what's on the bank statement. The auditor will complete the audit form and write up notes for any procedural changes that need to be done. And if necessary, the auditor will also prepare your 990EZ or N if you have, or long form if you have arranged for him or her to do that. The due dates for your audit are September 30th to Georgia PTA. So you need to make sure you get it done and have enough time to scan it and send it to Georgia PTA Council and District by September 30th. You will also need to confirm your audit in Member Hub. If you've already attended Member Hub training, you know how to do that. If you need help with that, just reach out and let us know, and we'll walk you through how to do it. Same thing with your 990. It needs to be completed as soon as your audit is complete. Don't wait until it's actually due, especially if you have to do the EZ or the long form. So it's due on the 15th of the 5th month after your fiscal year end, which is generally either October 15th or November 15th. So October 15th for May 31st fiscal year ends, and November for June 30th fiscal year ends. Please use certified mail to send your 990 form to the IRS. You can scan the information and send it to Georgia PTA, your district director, and your council president. It also needs to be confirmed in Member Hub. And again, here you have a screenshot of that, and we're happy to help you with that. All right, so I see some questions in the chat. Let me address the ones that I didn't get before. Yes, we are recording this, and so let me hang on just a second. Let me put this on this screen so I can see it. We are recording this session, and it will be posted later so that people can review it. Let's see, what do you do when you don't have a third non-signer for the reconciliation reports?
That can be anybody.
Yeah, it can be any PTA member.
Right. That doesn't have to be somebody on your EC. That could be your membership chair, your family engagement chair.
Yep. We generally get our principal to do it.
Yes.
Just because that adds to the transparency between the EC and the principal, the PTA and the principal. I think it strengthens that relationship. So that would be what I would call a best practice in that regard. It's certainly not a requirement, but any member of your PTA can be the third non-signer for reviewing the bank statement. Should voided checks have two signatures? The check request has to be filled out properly for a voided check. But the check in and of itself does not have to be signed by two people. It just needs to say void on it very clearly. Does the auditor need to be a CPA or have any specific financial background? Well, that's a good question. The short answer is it depends. If you are a humongous unit, you may have that you may benefit from working with somebody who has an accounting background, but it is certainly not required. This year I have done 25 audits at this point, and I'm a bookkeeper. I do have a pretty significant background in tax and accounting, but I am not a CPA, and I do not have a degree in accounting. I taught accounting software for many years, so that's how I learned it. I think that the auditor really needs to be somebody who understands PTA process, because sometimes PTA process and accounting process don't exactly match up. And some of the things that accountants will mark don't comply with PTA rules and vice versa. I know this because my husband, who sits upstairs in his office, is an accountant, and we have conversations about these things all the time. So the specific answer is no, the person does not have to have a specific financial background. I would recommend asking your council leadership for recommendations for good auditors in your area. And then to verify, the treasurer can access the Member Hub store. The treasurer has to have access to the Member Hub store, or you cannot do your Stripe reconciliations. So if you are a treasurer and you do not have access to your Member Hub store, let me know. You can, hang on, let me unmute you. 1 second.
Hey, so the reason she can have access to it. Well, first of all, our treasurer that signed up to be treasurer this year has already quit. So our treasurer of 2 years is taking on treasurer for a 3rd year until we can hopefully get someone. But anyways, she's been advised years past that she was not allowed to touch anything that involved the money. And so, except for signing checks and stuff like that. So she literally, we have had to print anything and everything for her and like hand deliver it. So the point is, I just wanted to confirm that she can go into the store. Yes. And okay.
Yes, and actually that brings up the biggest myth of all. I can't tell you how many times I hear what you just said and how many times it just makes me want to fall over on the floor. The treasurer is intimately involved with everything. The treasurer, in a lot of cases, is sitting at the check-in table for the bingo night or for the family fun event, the fall festival or whatever, taking money. And I keep hearing,
yeah, she would never, we would have to run Square without her.
No,
anything with Cashbox without her. Okay.
No, she can be involved with that.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and like our first slide said, your treasurer is the custodian of the funds. She should not be trusting someone else to run those reconciliation reports for her. Yeah. I wouldn't be comfortable with that. Any treasurer should not be comfortable with that. They need to be
she would
running.
Reconcile them, but she just wouldn't touch money in it, like besides what books she had. Or
so it's kind of like what's that old term? Kind of like was it putting like a Chinese wall in between herself and the money until she takes it to the bank, kind of thing. Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, I was the vice president last year, and the president would actually, we would take the money over more than she would. I don't think the treasurer ever took money over.
Yeah. So and actually, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, D92 in Dad, but just posted the treasurer is the person submitting the dues on Member Hub and reviewing all the orders. So yeah, she needs to have full access to Member Hub.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because in the training you did on Member Hub, I was noticing that you were doing all that, and I'm like, she has to be able to do. Okay, so thank you very much.
And if she needs help with that, just reach out. Let me know.
Okay, perfect.
I saw somebody asked about QuickBooks Online. Now Susan's has more of a financial history than I do. This is the first year I've used QuickBooks Online, and I will tell you, I love it. So if you can roll up your sleeves and get through that learning curve, I highly recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, and if you guys would be interested in us offering a QuickBooks Online for PTA course later, I'd be happy to run that at some point. I'm happy to do that. I also have experience with Membership Toolkit, with Nonprofit Treasure, and a couple of other products that may end up being more cost effective for you. So let's definitely talk about that after the fact. What we're going to get through PTA universities this week, and then we'll talk about what our training looks like going forward.
Right.
One other question from earlier, Amanda, was about DocuSign and what the position is on DocuSign for this year, or similar, to collect signatures to facilitate things.
Okay, so DocuSign, if it's a secured signature that date stamps, we can use electronic signatures. We are then going to ratify those in some way. It's kind of like our receipts. We want the originals. We understand until we can get originals that we may have to use some other things. Those are something that we're going to address in our governance documents to allow those things moving forward. But as of right now, that cannot be our only form of signature. I wish I had better news, but we're getting there. I promise. We're looking at these things and we're going to make us a little more digital friendly. And things like this, the QuickBooks Online, as we get into our wave 2 of trainings, we'll start looking at things that really can facilitate the local units, districts and councils as well. Okay, do we have any other questions, Susan?
Yeah, so Ashley just posted there's a license and fee requirement with DocuSign. One thing you might want to consider if you're going to go with that sort of a thing is using one that's less expensive like PandaDoc. One of the things that we did last year was scan and sign. So the person would do the check request and then scan it and send it to the president. The president would sign it and scan it again and send it to me. I would then I would fill out the treasurer part, write the check, and then meet the president in the parking lot of either the church or the grocery store nearby. And we would hand off at appropriate social distance and get things signed and then drop the checks in the mail. And then at the end of the year, we would collect everything that we had to collect.
Right.
Yeah,
And
so there are creative ways to do it. Meeting at the parking lot at your school is probably an option right now. Some of you haven't even started back to school yet. We're already in. I'm sure you all know that. We're in Cherokee County, so yeah, we've already gone back.
Yeah. So in the DocuSign, I think we had Adobe Sign for a while at Georgia PTA. It gets expensive quick. I'm just going to tell you. So those are things, again, that you can use those, but you still have to get the original signatures in the end before your paperwork goes off to audit, because you don't want a finding on something like that. But as long as your processes are transparent, you keep your checks and balances in place, we don't want to hold up us doing business. Okay. Okay, it looks like, Susan, you got a bunch of these.
Yeah, I tried to answer them as they came in while you were talking. That worked out really well.
Yeah. So you can unmute yourselves at any time now. So if there are any other questions, feel free to just jump in. Should processes be in bylaws? I know bylaws training is coming up.
Let me just clarify that. The question is basically like, let's say you have a reimbursement process, like 2 steps. Should that be something that is explicit in the bylaws, or, okay, no. Okay.
Yeah, that level of specificity is not going to be covered in your bylaws. That's going to be in the leadership resource guide. So go to the leadership resource guide for clarification on those types of processes. So the difference there is policy and procedure in the leadership resource guide versus a governing document in your bylaws. So yeah. And Alvin is doing bylaws training. He's fantastic, by the way. For those of you who have not met Alvin, he's amazing.
Yes, he is. And remember, your bylaws are a legal document, so we don't want to handcuff ourselves into being so narrow that we can't conduct business and we don't have some leeway. We can easily update the leadership resource guide, where the bylaws is a much bigger step. For
exactly.
us. Okay. Any other questions?
I had a question to piggyback off of the question I asked about the OOPS and the Excel. So you mentioned about the meeting minutes, and that's going to be what helps the auditor to align numbers.
Mhm.
So I fixed the oops, but the meeting minutes are still going to reflect that it was
Okay.
off.
Right, so you can actually attach an amendment to your meeting minutes. What you're supposed to do is, if you find a mistake in your meeting minutes, you use a red pen and you line through it and you make the change and you initial it. And then
Okay.
that change has to be adopted. That's in the secretary training. So I'm sort of summarizing how it's supposed to work. It does happen. And from an auditing point of view, as long as the explanation is available, even if if it doesn't match exactly, that's not going to be what we would consider a significant finding.
Okay.
Yeah.
What if you just created like a letter and had the
Perfectly
other
fine.
people, like the president, the secretary sign off that's fine?
Yep,
Okay.
that would be perfectly fine.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
It's basically just covering your behind.
Right. The more information you can provide to that auditor to say, hey, this is what happened. They might say, moving forward, do this and don't do this, which is fine. It's not a major finding. But again, the more you can explain it, the more transparent the situation can be, the better you're gonna be positioned.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So the question I have is about developing the budget. So this is my first year taking on the treasurer role, but I do accounting and finance in my day job, and so I'm trying to come up with a new budget that's going to reflect the need for like virtual tools, the fact that we're not going to have dances, and so I feel like it's unknown territory, and I don't know how those variances may be judged in the auditing process, because we're just trying to guess what our engagement's going to look like. And I'm just afraid that it's going to be really off, what we spend versus what we're budgeting. And I just didn't know if that was something that's, how that's judged in the audit for the PTA.
You want to talk about the budget process?
Okay, I'll talk about the budget process. So I always say that the division of responsibilities, I think your key person to talk to when you're developing a budget is your principal.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to know what they're going to allow at the school, what they're not. They're going to know what those teacher needs and the student needs. I mean, we can't go into the school anymore, and we're used to having our hand in,
Right.
in what's going on. So we're not going to have that this year. So really, you're going to need to rely on your principal a lot to develop your budget. And that kind of protects you a little bit too, because as an EC member, they should have input. And you can say to your members, we worked really closely with the principal on this. We've done the best we can to make these assumptions.
Yep.
We may have to amend later, but this is where we are.
Yeah.
So I think that that's key to get your principal. Now, as far as the audit, Susan?
Well, it really depends on if money is spent in line with the categories that you have identified in the budget. We don't really use a living budget methodology. We kind of use a fixed budget methodology in PTA. So what you'll want to do is give your best guess up front for your adopted budget. And then if something comes up and it's significantly different, go to your membership, give 72 hours notice and call a general membership meeting and say, here's what's come up and we want to present this, discuss it, and vote on it. But as long as you are spending within the categories that you identified up front and that were adopted by your membership, and you're not going significantly over on those categories, you should be fine from an audit point of view. One of the things that I learned a long time ago is not to get so granular in the budget. Keep it a little more high level. That'll give you a little bit of built-in flexibility for your categories. So instead of saying you're going to spend 150 on teacher luncheon 1 and 150 on teacher luncheon 2, put 300 in teacher luncheons.
Got it.
You know what I mean?
That makes sense, right?
Or just put 3,000 in hospitality and appreciation,
Right.
and spend it how you need to.
Right.
But be transparent with your members and say, this is what we normally do. And if they ask for more granularity, then give it to them. I usually go to the budget meeting with a roll-up and an expanded version so that I can show the line items individually.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
And very rarely do they ask for the more detail. They want
don't care.
that summary, that bullet point. This is what we're doing.
And really, the only thing that's going to set off a red flag with your general membership is going to be something that they are vehemently opposed to,
Right.
or that's out of left field.
Right.
So, in this particular, the first thing that comes to mind right now is that a lot of the units here in our area have contributed to playground funds in recent years. That may or may not be something that people are
Right.
putting money toward this year. I see water bottle fillers on the lists for this year, and teachers pay teachers assistants and stuff like that to help with virtual learning and those kinds of things. So I think just be aware of how your members are going to react to the things that you think you need to do.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Kid
We love
visit.
seeing all the kids and the
I
cats and
know,
everybody
they're
else.
ready.
Anyone else? Okay, you know what? I'm going to hand it, before everybody jumps off, I'm going to hand it over to Ty Barnett. She's our office manager at Georgia PTA, and she just wants to give a little bit of good news here real quick. Ty?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me, and thanks for being on the call. So just a little fun, just for your appreciation and your valuable time. We would like to gift 3 of you, maybe even 4 of you, with a $15 PTA Mart gift certificate, and it will be mailed by way of a swag bag. So I will email you the certificate, but I will turn that into a little swag bag, and it will have some treasurer trinkets in there and a few additional items. Sounds good? All right, so I go through the little screen here, and I have, is it Adrina Acevago? Yeah, congratulations. I have Whitney Thompson. I have Denise Babin. I think I saw your pretty cat go across the screen. You know what? And since this is the last treasurer call, let's go ahead and drop 2 more in. So I'm going to just look at the screen. I'm going to just call out a couple of names here. Let's go with Lindsay/Charlotte, because you had some challenges over there, and sometimes with challenges come a little uplift. And then let's go with Collins family. How about that? Woo! Yay! So guess what? You all are winners, and who knows, throughout the year, a wonderful Susan, wonderful Amanda may call and say, hey, we're doing something fun, and they may ask for some more trinkets. So guess what? You guys can win again, or some other ones can win as well. So thank you guys for having me. I will just look on the list and get your email addresses and send you those gift certificates in the mail, asking for your physical home address, and then I will mail your swag bags to you. So thank you for your service and all that you do. Have a successful year.
Thank you, Ty.
Thank you,
Thank
Ty.
you guys. You guys are phenomenal.
Yeah, that's
Thank
always
you.
fun. Yeah. I just want to thank everybody. I know everybody's busy, everybody's stressed, getting ready. Either your kids are back or they're getting ready to go back. So thank you for taking time to join us. We will be posting the PowerPoint. We have recorded this. Always reach out to your council leaders, your district leaders, and us if you have questions or need help. We're all here to help you. We're all a team. We want you to be successful. We know there are challenges right now, and we're here to support each other. So please don't be a stranger. Let us know what you need. And as we modernize our PTA at the state level, we love your input. Please let us know if there's something you think we can be doing better, or you'd like to see us, implement in our guidance documents so you can use tools or things like that. We'd love to hear from you guys. We'd love to hear what your needs are. So thank you for everything. Thank you for joining us tonight. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you so much.
You're
Bye,
welcome.
y'all. Good night.
Good evening.